All right, so Charlamagne Tha God opens up about Joe Budden. On the latest Angie Martinez interview, she asked Charlamagne what the relationship between him and Joe Budden is. And Charlamagne says a couple of really interesting things that I want to sort of give you my take on. So let's get right into it. Before I get into the Angie Martinez interview, I do want to say that this is not the first time this year that Charlamagne has brought up Joe Budden's name. As a matter of fact, on a Vlad TV interview earlier this year, Charlamagne goes on to say that even though he hasn't spoken to Joe Budden in over 4 years, that there is no beef between the two of them. Also, Joe Budden has gone on the record and says that he has no hate in his heart or no beef with anybody in the industry. So you guys take that as however you want. But let's go ahead and get into some of these things that Charlamagne said on the Angie Martinez interview. The first thing I want to bring up is when Charlamagne says when we are mad at each other, we go bad on each other. So what is Charlamagne talking about? Well, if you recall, after Joe Budden turned down the Spotify deal, Charlamagne and Joe Budden were going back on each other on air, on the microphone. And the situation got so bad where on one of the podcast episodes, Joe Budden actually alleges that there could be a potential smear campaign against him being masterminded by Charlamagne Tha God. And then a couple of weeks later, Charlamagne goes through his own personal smear campaign, and he kind of insinuates the same thing, that Joe Budden is masterminding a smear campaign against him. So going bad on each other is a very interesting term, because apparently there's levels and layers to going bad on each other on air, but also they're playing games. They play games off air. So it's a very interesting wording and topic to bring up from Charlamagne. The next thing he says that I thought was interesting, Charlamagne says, I can understand why he felt that way. As far as I'm concerned, this is the first time Charlamagne has ever openly admitted to understanding like Joe Budden's point of view. So what is Charlamagne talking about? Like I mentioned earlier, after Joe Budden turned down the Spotify deal, Charlamagne sort of went on air and insinuated that Joe Budden doesn't know how to negotiate. And Joe Budden took offense to this. He had big problems with this because from Joe Budden's point of view, Charlamagne is one of the most powerful and biggest voices in black media. And for Charlamagne to say that Joe Budden can't negotiate, he's basically messing up Joe Budden's business. He's sounding off an alarm to other executives, business people, and making it seem like Joe Budden can't negotiate. So if Charlamagne is saying this, who is one of the most powerful voices in media, why would companies and businesses want to negotiate with Joe Budden if this is the narrative that Charlamagne is pushing? So I think that's what Charlamagne was referring to, that maybe he shouldn't have gone on air and made those statements, because they, coming from him, they could have profoundly hurt Budden's business. Aside from that, on a side note, during that time period, there was this big conversation or dialogue about being self-made, own your own content, freedom, independence, coming from Joe Budden's camp versus Charlamagne's camp, saying that you have to team up with big business and corporate America to grow, and you have to have partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. So that sort of back and forth dialogue and different point of view has always been sort of like at the core and heart of the two of them. So that's also something noteworthy to bring up. And then the final thing that Charlamagne brought up that I thought was significant is towards the end of that section, he says that even though they've gone bad on each other, that they've always been able to sort of like reconcile and pick up before, and they can do it again going in the future. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is the first time Charlamagne has openly sort of like opened the door for future collaborations with Joe Budden. So with all that being said, what do I think? One of the things I think is that the timing of Charlamagne saying these things is extremely interesting, considering the fact that he just recently announced his $200 million deal. Now, there are people on the internet, and I say on the internet because this is like, there's no way of having a direct source, because I mean, I don't have Charlamagne's contract in front of me, but there are people saying that Charlamagne's $200 million contract is not guaranteed money. It's a contract based on Charlamagne's performance and ability to hit certain benchmarks. So if this is true, you know, bringing the Joe Budden, if Charlamagne was able to bring the Joe Budden podcast to Netflix, that would certainly help Charlamagne hit whatever benchmark he needs to hit to get his 200 million. You know, when you look at the lineup of podcasts that Charlamagne has taken to Netflix, they don't come anything close to being as produced, as established, or whatever as the Budden podcast. I mean, you could arguably say that you could say that the Joe Budden podcast is the biggest podcast in urban media. So if Charlamagne was able to pull that move and get Joe to go on Netflix, that would certainly help him with whatever metrics. Now, will it happen? Probably not, because, you know, Joe Budden's, number one, he's Mr. Independent, and the word on the internet is that these podcasts that are going on Netflix is demanding video exclusivity, so they're not going to be able to post their podcast content on YouTube. They're only going to be able to post clips. Again, Joe Budden being Mr. Independent and loving his freedom, I don't think he would ever go for that unless he himself was maybe getting the 200 million directly. But yeah, so I just don't think that would ever occur. But when you're talking about two major players like Joe Budden and Charlamagne, two whales, two titans in this industry, you don't seek out relationships at that level unless you're looking to get something out of them. There has to be like a mutual benefit, because at the end of the day, it is business. It is business relationship. When we talk about relationships between Joe Budden and Charlamagne, we're not talking about like, oh, let's be buddies. Like these are two individuals that are running big business. So business is at the heart of it, and it has to be mutually beneficial for the both of them. So what can I conclude from this? Would I like to see Joe Budden and Charlamagne reunite? I mean, yeah, I loved, like, when they did the end of the year wrap up. I loved their chemistry. I loved the opposing, like, the different points of view. I loved their commentary on culture and hip hop, and I do think that they are the two biggest voices in Black media, and that would be amazing if they can come together, work together. And I do think that there is a scenario where they can join forces and mutually help each other grow and if they're able to figure out how to do that, I think sky's the limit. And I think we're looking at like big things coming up in the future. But under no circumstance do I see a world where Joe Budden joins the Black Effect Media or just sort of gets played by Charlamagne into joining Netflix. But I do see it as a potential situation where like they both realize like, hey, we're the two most powerful voices in the space, and if we were to join forces, we could take this to a whole nother universe. I definitely see that happening. But that's just all hearsay. I will be very interested in tomorrow's podcast episode, Joe Budden podcast episode, as to whether or not he addresses this and what's his take on it. I kind of have a feeling that he's going to say that he doesn't have beef either, and that he's gonna be open to the idea of working with Charlamagne. I mean, it's just logical. It's just logical. They're the two biggest players, and they have a history. They know if they work together, they can accomplish more. So that's sort of my take on it. What do you guys think? Do you think Joe Budden is gonna go into his narcissistic bag and be like, nah, I'm him. I don't need anybody, or is, I don't know. We'll see. But let me know what you think. All right, peace.